Dr. Amar Dasta is a senior lecturer and a course director for information systems in at the South Bank, at the London South Bank University.
Okay, going to the main point actually I would like to talk to you today. Obviously this is a title actually which I have identified. The earlier speaker, Jed, beautifully described the paramount importance of actually remembering the Adwa. Honestly, if Adwa or the war actually was not actually turned into Ethiopian favor, God knows what would have happened to all of us. That's, I think, a very good starting point for all of us actually to get started. It isn't actually only for Ethiopians, but also for the wider African. That's actually quite an important area. That's why I would like to focus on the relevance of actually contemporary Ethiopia and African history, obviously in the context of the Adwa War. I started off actually by just identifying this very simple symbol, but which really beautifully magnifies what Ethiopia is all about. The color depicted within this, the green and yellow and red flag, is the symbol of actually not only just for Africa, for the entire African world and for the black race. That reflects purely the reason why we need to actually value human life, the reason why we need to live in peace and harmony, the reason why we need to defend actually our own unique identity, and us, obviously, all of us being born with the image of God, no one is actually better than anyone else in any way, in any manner. Therefore, the flag of Ethiopia, which was obviously depicted within those three tricolors, is just a symbol of actually all peace-loving nations across the globe. It's not only actually related within Ethiopia, but I can mention so many African countries which have actually adopted the flag of Ethiopia as their own flag. I could mention easily Ghana, Senegal, even actually we could go even further to Latin America towards actually Bolivia and other countries. Therefore, the significance of actually this Ethiopian color is actually quite huge. That's why I have deliberately highlighted this particular image in here. And equally, you could see the determination. This is actually the war which has actually have taken place nearly 120 years ago. But Ethiopia actually faced the arrogant, barbarian, no value for a human being, that kind of fascist colonial power which actually invaded Ethiopia at that time. But Ethiopia managed actually to curb all that passion. It's not just because of course, for religious reasons, because of other sentimental values, we may actually consider some other sources, but in my strong opinion, that's my personal opinion, it's just down to the determination of actually Ethiopian people. Predominantly for the unity of Ethiopian people. That's why we managed actually to have this self-value, pride. You can actually see it with any Ethiopian. You can actually see Ethiopians. I don't want to say only Ethiopians because that could be the issue for the majority of African countries, but I'm using Ethiopia just to illustrate my point. So that is a value, the respect, the culture, which is actually is embedded in us, which makes us so polite. So I can go on and on actually just describing this. But it came down to the value actually we give actually to ourselves and to fellow other human beings. That's a kind of a very brief description I want to highlight. But most importantly, we could actually refer just to simply the tradition of Ethiopian independence. I'm sure all of us would know what actually this means to Ethiopia and for the rest of the African community. I'm sure, as Jed beautifully described it from the anthropological perspective, Ethiopia is proudly committed to freedom. I don't think any of us could possibly overlook this fact. And also reverberated actually with memories of Ethiopian experience as a long-lived independent polity nation. We may actually see it as something of this nature, especially for those of us who were born in a situation where we didn't actually see the destructive nature of actually war. If you ask me my own personal opinion and my own personal experiences, my own young mother have lost actually her dad during the war, fighting during the Second World War. Therefore, as a child, I was actually brought up in valuing what actually means to live in peace and independence and in harmony. That's actually quite an important issue. But as I have mentioned right at the beginning, could you please imagine what could have happened if Ethiopia were defeated on the hands of actually the fascist Italy? Just simply remember for a few seconds. It's a really would have been a completely different story. Therefore, we cannot possibly ignore the importance of those issues. But just simply give us our historical background. Ethiopia as a nation always have been threatened by obviously different sources across so many centuries. Just look at actually what has happened just prior to the emperor actually king coming to power. Prior to that, Emperor Theodorus between 1855 to 1872, he tried his utmost to unite Ethiopia. The same thing can be said about Emperor Johannes between 1855 to 1872. Obviously, they are the one who obviously brought the opportunity for a Menelik II to come to power. But those two individuals which I have mentioned, they actually lost their life in defending actually their motherland. What does that tell us actually, what Ethiopianism means? That's actually symbolizes the very strong nature, the very will of Ethiopians who cannot possibly actually just live under any other superpower. And equally, we could also identify various sources. Of course, Menelik was actually the main warrior who actually brought everyone together. But we cannot possibly ignore or overlook the very fact that Ethiopians from four corners of actually the Ethiopian nation actually came together to defend their motherland. I could mention some as an example. Ras Alula Mangasha, Ras Subhat from Tigray, Dejazmach Tahab from Akologizai currently under Eritrea. And I could mention the names, various people coming from the Gojam province, from Yeju, from Wallaga, from Harar, from Shawa. Those people actually sacrificed actually their life actually for us to live in peace and in dignity. We cannot possibly think of or possibly overlook their role in defending the motherland and actually for giving us the pride we all actually just experiencing actually as the present time. And I'm sure that will continue for the future generation to come to. And equally, what that means, the defeat of Italy by Ethiopia at the Battle of Adwa not only demonstrated, the resilience and the patriotism of Ethiopians, but equally also made Ethiopia the steward of actually future hopes for the emancipation of Africa that was subjugated under the foreign power. That was a motivating factor, not only for Ethiopia, as I have said earlier, for the majority of actually the black race. Therefore, in reality, Adwa is a purely historic event. That's a historic event mainly for three reasons. One, for anything to be considered as a historic, either it has to occur for the first time, or it has to have significant consequences, and equally it has to have a symbolic importance. If those issues actually could be identified in any situation, that could be classified as a kind of historical event. But in any consideration, whichever perspective you look at it, what happened in March 1st, 1896 have actually all those characteristics. It happened for the first time, it brought actually significant changes, and equally that was a thing which had made obviously quite huge issues for the rest of the world. And obviously that means quite a lot for different stakeholders of the time. For the colonialists, what did that actually tell us? They were surprised and equally humiliated that a member of the white race actually had lost. That was the first time ever. Yeah, the black people managed actually to win a war which was obviously forced upon them. That's actually quite a significant issue. And equally, that by itself actually have shaped how actually we should look things actually be around us. As I have mentioned right point number 2 here, they suddenly have to rethink and revalue how actually they should be able actually to see the Africans and the wider black race at the same time. That's actually quite a significant point. As I've highlighted it in here, prior to that, they've been predominantly inhabited by primitive people. That was the assumption, that was the thinking at that time for those fascist and colonialist power. Of course, no colonialist will come to any country for a charitable purposes. We all know. But obviously that's an important issue one cannot possibly overlook. Therefore, but the consequence for Ethiopia means a victory for the underdog, because Ethiopia have never been expected actually to win that war. A victory for right over wrong. I don't think any of us could overlook this fact, and I'm sure no one could possibly deny this fact equally. So the invading army was forced to formally acknowledge the sovereignty of Ethiopia. That was actually imposed on them. No, that's not because of their preference. Ethiopia also sent a message. It's a message for self-respecting human beings and for all peace-loving nations. I mean, after all, we all are human beings. How can one actually oppress and just live on someone's back, which is by any imagination, obviously that was the wrong thing. Just to demonstrate my point, actually I just put two graphs in here. This was actually the map of Africa around 1880. But by the year 1897, the map of Africa have completely changed. That's the reality. If you look at the map of Ethiopia, for example, there is no boundary. Ethiopia used to extend well further into the Central Africa. That was actually purpose to live in peace and in harmony. But by the year 1897, these superpowers actually have divided the whole of African nations. Even a country on top of Ethiopia, such as Eritrea, actually have been created. That's the reality. We cannot possibly deny that fact. But equally, what would have happened if Ethiopia had lost actually that particular war? That's an important issue. Let me go very briefly again. Another negative consequence for Ethiopia, and I'm sure as we all know, this is a map of Africa. This is a map of Ethiopia. Just think of it for a few seconds. Look at actually the map of Ethiopia, and how Ethiopia was actually just simply surrounded and blocked actually from the sea. Most of us, for the political consumption and for other reasons, we say this and the other about the current situation in Eritrea. Personally, I have no problem with Eritrea and our Eritrean brothers and sisters. But the reality, the map of Eritrea have extended right to the corner of the Ethiopian boundary to block Ethiopia. And next to it, there is a little country called Djibouti. Next to it, there is Somaliland and extended. That by itself actually says quite a lot. But God forbid, Menelik managed obviously to overturn everything, managed to win, but it didn't manage by any magic, but purely by the sacrifices our fathers actually have done. For that, I think we all have to be very proud, but we need to keep that momentum. But that momentum only can be maintained by thinking or having that kind of positive and unified thinking. Thanks very much.